Well, a very good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's What Now, What Next, which is all about back to school. And there couldn't be a better topic for us all to talk about. I know out of all of the discussions that we've had and the amounts of phone calls and emails that we get in my electorate office, probably the biggest topic going is from parents wanting to know when their child can finally get back to school. It's been tough for all of us, and I know really tough on kids, really tough on families and parents, and certainly tough on schools, teachers, principals, and the leadership community. And that is why we're very, very fortunate tonight to have with us a great panel, including two school principals, Chris Chant, principal of Caulfield Junior College, Gail Yardley, principal of Caulfield South Primary School, Cara Lowe, Caulfield Primary School's Council President, and Dr. Emily Berger, Educational and Development Psychologist from the Faculty of Education at Monash University. We might just very quickly get a bit of a wave going from everybody. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. It is, as I say, a really exciting topic. The idea of tonight's topic will be that I'll have a number of questions for each of our panelists, and then we will have the opportunity for the attendees to ask questions to our panelists as we go. So can I ask all of you that are watching tonight, if you've got a question, put it in the chat box and we'll get back to you with that shortly. But before I do any of that, I wanted just to outline to you what some of the main focuses that we've been really concentrating on as an alternative government. This session that we put together is all about an alternative roadmap. We know that the government has got their plans, but we believe that the best opposition that should be on offer is an opposition that is full of ideas, full of options, and full of a way forward that certainly the community can actually be able to look at and evaluate and hopefully embrace. And what I'm going to put up right now is just an example of some of the things that we have been talking about as part of that alternative roadmap. And they're very important for us to be considering because firstly, we need to be thinking about how we restart things in a safe way. How do we get the economy back? How do we get people back into the workplace? And how do we get people back in small business? We've got so many small businesses at the moment that are really struggling, and we want to ensure that we get a safe return to many of those small businesses going forward. So that is certainly one of the things that we're focused on. And in a minute, you'll see on the screen an alternative roadmap that will actually talk about that. Firstly, we talk about abolishing the 5 kilometre rule because, again, people, including families and our loved ones, don't all live within a 5 kilometre radius, and we want to be ensured that we are able to visit our loved ones. We want all of our school children to return back by first week of term 4, and we've had announcements today that are getting our kids back. We also want to ensure that we see restaurants opening as soon as possible, cafes, other businesses opening as soon as possible in a safe manner. We want to look at easing on restrictions for events, and we had the events industry with us last week talking about how we safely do that. We want to ensure that we have junior sport, non-contact sport get started as soon as possible. We know, again, tonight is a focus on kids. We want to ensure that we get our kids out and about, off the couch, off watching Netflix, into the sporting fields, in and about being able to play sport with their friends. And these are some of the things that we have been talking about. More specifically with tonight's conversation, one of the announcements that we have only just launched as of yesterday, and that is, we've just on the screen, you've got the return to school. So face-to-face learning from the 12th of October for primary schools, specialist schools, VC and VCAL, and today an announcement of Year 7 students. And so we will be talking to our panelists about particularly the primary schools and what the plans are for Caulfield and surrounds. And then from the 26th of October, we're seeing Year 8s, Year 9s and 10s also starting from then. The early schools and Year 11 and 12 also are starting from the 12th of October. The other announcement that we have made is specifically around looking at those using Myki on public transport and extending student passes to 2021. We know a lot of kids earlier on in the year and families had purchased Myki passes for their kids and have hardly used public transport at all, with us being in lockdown for really about 6 months of the year. So what we're saying is to roll over student Myki cards into 2021 to allow all students from Year 11 and below and refund students currently in Year 12 with the cost of Myki. And hopefully that will be very well received. So let's get on to tonight's conversation. And I'll bring the panel up. And as I say, tonight is a really important conversation because it's all about the future of our schools. Now, we are very lucky in Caulfield because education is probably one of the key most important things that is rated amongst our community and certainly my constituents. We have great success rates when it comes to student results all the way through at primary and at secondary level. And we're very fortunate, whether it be public education or private education, to have, in an unbiased way, I can proudly say, some of the best schools, not in just Victoria, but I would arguably say in Australia. We have great teachers, we have great principals, and we have great school council leaders. And I wanted to say a big thank you to all of those in our community in the great work that our teaching staff and our educators do in ensuring that our kids get the best education possible. So to bring us up firstly with tonight is I wanted to cross to our principal, Chris Chant from Caulfield Junior College. Welcome, Chris. And Chris is currently the principal at Caulfield Junior College, began his career back in 1987. He doesn't look old enough to have started back then, keeps himself in great nick, and has had a number of school activities and positions, and including being the principal at Mentone, Garden Vale, and now at Caulfield. So welcome once again, Chris. And if I could just ask you, how is everything going? What has it been like this year for particularly your teaching staff and also for your school community?
Thank you, David, and acknowledge the other panel members, and thank you for your time this evening. It's been a year like we've never experienced in education before. We've had 3 starts to a school year inside 1 year. We've had a graduate group of teachers who have not been able to physically connect with their classrooms. They've done it online from distance. We've had a cohort of children who've had their entire learning year disrupted and through no fault of their own. And it really has been a huge challenge, and we look forward to Monday when we get all our students back and we can try in the last 10 weeks to address some of the key issues that have occurred over the last number of learning from home periods, and just try and get through the school year in a position that we can take on 2021 with a renewed enthusiasm and some challenges ahead of us.
I know certainly in the first time back, you had to do all of your temperature testing and all that kind of stuff. And I came to the school and you did, the wonderful thing was the meet and greet. You'd be out there every day meeting the kids. How was the parent community kind of held up? And I suppose you're probably getting lots of pressure from a lot of the parent community just wanting to get their kids back.
Just acknowledge our parents right across all of our school communities for the wonderful work they've done in the home front. But it's been challenging. I think the parents of the novelty has well and truly worn off. The impact on the families trying to work, trying to maintain relationships and home arrangements, educating children across early years, primary school and into secondary and even into university from home where they're not trained educators, they've done an amazing job. So I think many of them will be celebrating the return of their children on Monday, because it will give their children a degree of certainty and routine, but it'll also allow the house and the home situation to also return to a degree of routine and certainty.
And just finally, in terms of being able to adapt to online learning and all that kind of thing, how has that gone for, I suppose, particularly the teachers? Because it would be very stressful, I'm sure, for teachers to be able to learn a whole new way of learning.
Yeah, look, we started the remote and flexible learning really from a very low base and through no fault of our own. And we struggled with the technology. We've worked our way through. We've run 2 separate platforms. Our children have really taken on the online learning because they're just good at technology. That's what they do. Our younger teachers have been fantastic in terms of being able to share their skills and technology capabilities with their older, more experienced teaching cohort. So that's been interesting to watch that. So, you know, that's been a real challenge for us, getting that online learning going. Now that our children are a little bit more familiar with it, we'll keep some elements of it and we'll build that into what we move forward. But we just want to get our children back into the classrooms with their children in their class and with their teacher. That's the important part.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. I'm going to now cross over to Gail Yardley. Gail's a very proud government school principal who's been in education for over 40 years. Again, I just would never have picked that. Time must have flown, Gail. And I'd also say Gail and I came together in a different life when I was involved as president of Arddock Youth Foundation. So I know Gail's been very, very passionate advocate for ensuring all kids of all backgrounds get a good quality education. Gail's been the principal for almost 20 years, 20 years out of the 40 years, and the last 10 years as principal of Caulfield South Primary School. I wanted to start in terms of, for you, Gail, firstly, how have your teachers held up and what's been happening at Caulfield South Primary School?
Look, David, first of all, could I just endorse what Chris said and acknowledge you for the importance of education in this time, in all times. And as you said, I've known you from a history, and I know you also have that passion for equity in education that I have. But also to the other panellists and everybody attending tonight, I just thank you all for thinking that this is important, because it certainly is. Education is the most important focus that we can have in any point in time, particularly when there's change and uncertainty. So thank you all. And David, our teachers and families, I believe, as Chris obviously does too, have been amazing. There was at the beginning a certain energy and enthusiasm around the new learning. We're actually using a platform called Seesaw that we've been using for several years. So we actually started with that base where the teachers had been quite practiced at using the elements of it, not the depth that we actually required. And like Chris, some of our youngest teachers jumped in and ran optional professional development for teachers. And there are teachers my age who had such an enthusiasm and an energy about them at the start of all of this, which was just very typical of teachers. And we were really proud of them, and we were all quite excited about this different, there was a certain novelty to it in the beginning. That has well worn away. That lack of personal connection to children, to parents, has just been a bit heart-wrenching for many parents and many children, and certainly for our teachers. Teachers generally come into this profession as connectors, as communicators, and people who are very relational and want to build good, solid relationships on which to begin that learning journey with the children. So it's become very tiresome over such an extended period of time and very worrying.
So obviously, when we touched in terms of the importance of ensuring that there is equity and we don't have kids fall through the cracks, I'm sure that you've probably been contacted by a number of parents that have been really struggling, and kids that have been really struggling through this time. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, David, we had to make sure that every child could actually be connected. And I think most schools were handing out, and some schools out in the more disadvantaged areas we had to hand out many devices so that children could all be connected. Parents were needing devices from home that children might have used, part-time at various times, but with everybody online, it was a huge job just to get everybody connected online. But as I say, it's that lack of personal connection and engagement. Teachers are very good in person at engaging our children, and we have teachers who could take over play school at the drop of a hat, as I think I've seen some amazing footage of teachers' videos and trying to engage children. We've tried explicit teaching through use of videos and live online teaching. The live teaching would be the closest we can get, but we have children dropping out. We have things going on in the background for some homes and children not able to focus. Do teachers then make the rest of the class hold on, well, hang on, we just get so-and-so reconnected? Many issues around the live teaching, which should be the ideal, but we found that with making the videos, which the teachers were a little bit confronted by early days, taking so long, and same with us doing our assemblies, it's not something that we're practiced at doing. And in the end, it was like, it's okay, warts and all, I'm doing it once. I found it exceedingly difficult. But look, the children actually loved some of the videos because they could stop them, pause them, replay them, talk back to the teacher and have the teacher's attention. I had heard some beautiful stories about children and their videos, thinking the teacher was just their own personal teacher, and it was actually just a video. There was no live connection. But none of it has been ideal.
Yeah. So thanks for that. I want to go across to Cara. Cara, from welcome. From a perspective of a parent leader, school council leader, and I know that you've been involved for a number of years at Caulfield Primary School, which is again a great school that's grown substantially in more recent years. You've been the parent representative on the Caulfield Primary School for 4 years, and for 3 years currently serving as the president of the school council, served on the Parents Friends Committee. I've seen you around just about everything, fates, interactions with different types of education. So, promoting advocacy for your school is something that you've been exceptional at. But I wanted to ask you, in terms of the interaction between the parents and the teachers and the school leadership, what has that been like? And what's your role been in kind of facilitating that information?
I think I'd like to reiterate everything that Gail and Chris have said. Like, it's been an amazing effort by a lot of people to produce and to deliver amazing education in really difficult circumstances. But I think that it has been extremely fraught. The communication between the leadership team that we have as school council and sort of the leadership team at school, which is Peter Gray and Margie Gordon and they're great teachers. Really, they do all the operational, but we have had a lot of conversations about mental health and wellbeing of the staff, of the children and of the families. That has been what a lot of our work has been around. And a lot of the discussions have been around how to ensure that everyone stays safe and gets through this as best we can. And it's been extremely difficult on a lot of people. And I think that from a communications perspective from the department, that it's, this has been a new world for everyone, and there's been at sometimes a lot of communication that's been confusing, and other times you feel like you'd want more communication. It has been really hard to sift through all that and to promote, and I think to deal with the families and to give them a sense of confidence that it's all going to be as best as it can be and it will be okay. I think that has been there's a lot of fear out there that the children are really missing out, that there's going to be some long-term effects from this experience, and really to talk to the fact that we're all in this together, that it's not going to last forever, and that we just have to deal with today what we've got today. We can't, and trying to really keep people just focused on the here and now, and let's just do what we've got to do today. Keep these kids as engaged as we can, which has probably been the biggest challenge, I think, to keep the kids. Our kids are really engaged, with school, love it, but keeping them engaged all day, every day has been a huge challenge. Yeah.
And in terms of the kind of information that you've been getting from, say, the department, how does that work? Have you been, as a school council, briefed about what happens and then that gets fed on through the school? Can you just...
that really comes through Peter, through the principal, or that education, all that communication comes through Peter, and then he sifts through it and shares it with school council as is necessary, and then with the broader community as well. But I think that I can't remember, we're up to about, Peter puts out, as I'm sure Chris and Gail do as well, a COVID update, and I don't know what number we're up to. We get 2 or 3 a week, probably. He has been numbering them, so if you're reading the latest, he's done a very good job at that. Sometimes they are very lengthy, particularly when we're looking at going back to school and the how that's to be managed. A lot of the time they talk about reaching out and support. We've talked a lot about support services, but from the education department, the feeling is that it's been often very last minute. That has been a really big challenge, that parents want certainty about what's happening, and they want to know, like a lot of things, if you know what you're dealing with, you can deal with it. But it's when you're not quite sure what's around the next corner that this becomes a little bit hard. And I think now that we've got dates and times to go back to school, it makes this a whole lot easier. Yeah, but it did make going into the last lot of school holidays quite challenging, not knowing if you'd be able to go anywhere, whether or not they were going back to school. Yeah.
And just lastly for you, Cara, I know that the great thing about your school, just as Caulfield Junior, Caulfield South, the school communities are so important, and getting the parents together, the things that you do around fundraising, and just that overall face-to-face connection that the parents, committees, and the kids themselves have. That must be really difficult that you haven't been able to do that for some time.
Fundraising for public schools is going to be a huge issue, I think, for the next 12 months. It has been this year. We're missing out a lot of funds. We just can't fundraise in the current environment. And also, I think the school community to bring us all back together. I think we've all been, by the time you focus on the kids and getting them what they have to do, and your own work and your own family, one of the things I think that we're all missing is that parent interaction. We've tried a few times as parents from Caulfield Primary School to get together on, Zooms and things, but really you just over Zoom by the evening, and you really, that has been really hard. I think that is something, and we're not really aware of the parents that are really struggling. We've tried, but that has been really hard. So I think when we go back to school, and I think as you and I, David, have spoken about, that it's going to be next year that we really start to see a lot of the impacts of what we've been doing. Yep.
Well, that's probably a really good segue to our next panellist, and that is Dr. Emily Berger. Welcome to you, Emily.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. And look, I know that you're an educational and development psychologist at the Faculty of Education at Monash University, and specifically what caught my attention is the work that you've been doing around research in this space. So maybe if you could start by telling our audience tonight what research you've been doing and what the effects the pandemic has had on our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, thank you very much, obviously, for having us along and the lovely panel as well. I really appreciate the opportunity, David. And I would say as well, a lot of the concepts that have already been raised are really interesting. So certainty has come up a lot in the research, relationships and social connection and connectedness has come up as well. And a lot of the impacts that we're experiencing, Zoom fatigue, for example, you know, a lot of the impacts that we're experiencing as adults are the impacts that kids are experiencing as well. So we really just have to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, well, how have I coped? Because it's likely that kids have had the same sorts of challenges. In terms of the research, so the research that we've been doing is around the mental health, the social, emotional impacts for children, for families, for educators as well. We've started talking to educators as well. Research has shown there's reduced concentration, inattention. Kids were less able to regulate their emotions and regulate their behaviours, so less able to control their behaviours. Increased anxiety, stress, we found that as well. Even symptoms similar to post-traumatic distress, so symptoms that we would liken to post-traumatic distress, there's been symptoms like that as well. And as I said, difficulty regulating emotions, difficulty regulating behaviours as well, so increased anxiety, anger, and also irritability as well. So as we as adults have probably been tested in terms of becoming more irritable, we've found that kids have had those same impacts. I think also as well, what we're going to see for schools particularly, and schools are likely probably planning for this, is increased dependence on parents or caregivers. So kids will be fearful, as we've been sort of apprehensive and fearful about contracting coronavirus. Kids will also be taking in messages and maybe misinterpreting information as well, so they don't have the cognitive abilities to be able to process information in the same way that we can. So they might have increased dependence on their parents or caregivers, which is likely to lead to separation issues. And I'm sure a lot of the teachers, particularly those listening now, are probably thinking about those kids who are having separation anxiety issues at the beginning of the year, and they're probably going to come back and it's going to be back to square one for those kids, dare I say. And all of this is linked to increased hypervigilance. There's an increased threat, and kids aren't necessarily able to process the information and understand the information in the same way that we are. So there's, you know, increased stress and activation of that fight or flight stress response. And as I said, that's going to lead to emotion and behaviour regulation issues. I would like to, I guess, from that touch on, because I think this is really important for the discussion going forward, and I've seen a few questions that have come up in the chat box as you've all been talking, is there's going to be kids who are resilient and bounce back. So as there are adults who are resilient and bounce back, the research shows that kids do bounce back. How quickly they'll bounce back in terms of their learning and their social development is something that does need to be looked at. I saw a question pop up around that. There are some key factors though. We can't know necessarily how many kids are going to do well and how many kids are going to do poorly in relation to school return and COVID-19, because it really depends on a number of risk factors for kids who are more at risk. So when we look at the literature for COVID-19, but also the wider pandemic literature, kids whose parents have a mental health issue or emotional challenges themselves, they might be more at risk of having adverse impacts from COVID-19. As I said, the interpretations of kids, so it's not necessarily if kids have known someone who's contracted COVID or they've contracted COVID, it's whether kids think that they're susceptible, it's whether kids think that they're at risk. And so research has shown that it's not necessarily been exposed to it directly. It's actually maybe through media reporting and watching the media, and through kids having this really negative perception that they're at risk or that family are at risk. And then that can cause separation worries because they're fearful if they leave mum or dad or whoever takes care of them, then something bad might happen. And so like I said, that's where schools are going to really struggle with some kids is getting them back to school.
Has there been an issue in terms of correlation between, say, fear? So there's obviously been a lot of discussion around the fear of the virus and that equating to kids' confidence. So, just touching on that last point that you've had, is that going to be a big issue in trying to rebuild kids' confidence, even social interaction? So we've got principals and leadership here on the panel tonight. Kids are going back next week. How's that going to go?
It is, and it's all about how kids think about it. So it's not, as I said, it's not necessarily have you been directly exposed. It's how kids think about it, and of course, how kids think about it leads on to how they're going to feel about it and how they're going to behave, and so that might lead to some negative behaviours or school avoidance behaviours. So really, the key is for parents and teachers and those around young people to really try to tap into. What are kids thinking about? What do they think about going back to school? What do they think about COVID-19? Some kids are relaxed about it. And I know in my work as a psychologist, I talk to kids all the time. Every time we talk, we check in about COVID-19 and what they're thinking and what they feel about COVID-19. Some kids are really relaxed about it, but other kids might have those really unhelpful thoughts. But we as adults can actually help to restructure and give a more positive and hopeful message about the risks and what's going to happen for them.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Emily. I'm going to now open up for questions from the audience. And I know there's been a number of you that have been on the chat box putting things in. So thank you to everybody. If I could ask Jeffrey Kempler, welcome, Jeff, and go for it. You're first off the rank.
Okay, thank you very much. And good evening, everyone. And thank you to the panelists and everyone else listening. I have got 4 children. 2 of them are still in primary school. And I've been very concerned, obviously, about all the big issues, but particularly focused on the ones that are, selfishly that I've got to deal with each day. And I've been reading quite a bit of the literature, and Save the Children did a very extensive survey across a number of countries, identifying the various issues that they think are there. In our particular circumstance, fear of the virus has not been an issue because, we're first of all, we are safe, and second of all, we've had lots of conversations. It's much more about their loss of motivation, their loss of interest in doing things, and their whole world has sort of shrunk. And I'm particularly concerned about the overstimulation of the flight and fight response that I think Dr. Berger referred to, because they're in front of these hyperstimulatory environments for far longer. And, hands up all those who think the kids are just doing Zoom classes and nothing else. There won't be too many of them. So I've actually seen these personality changes. Now, my question, I'm concerned about, are we just going to assume that kids will snap back to some sort of normal mindset and then just pick up the problems for those who don't? Or is there some proactive, preemptive strategy that can actually take advantage of this? Because I can't remember the chap's name now, but one of them referred to this as actually an opportunity for a rite of passage. It was Anna Rubinstein, that's right. That this is actually a rite of passage. It's an opportunity to really take this as a positive. I mean, I'm really trying to put lipstick on a pig, I know that. But what's the choice, at least? Any comments on that?
Yeah, all right, I'll open up to, thanks very much. That's a great start to the question. I'll open up to our panel. Who'd like to have a go at answering that one?
I could speak to, I appreciate the question. I think it just links on really well to what I was talking about in terms of tapping into and continuing to tap into what kids are thinking about, because of course your thoughts, lead on to those negative feelings and emotions. But there is an opportunity for resilience. So the research has also shown that children have experienced resilience something we call post-traumatic growth, where we experience resilience, but we learn something about ourselves. So actually having kids and having conversations with kids and activities with kids where we're asking them, what have you learned? What have you achieved? Now, achievement might look very different during COVID to what typical achievement in relation to school looks like. But what is it that you've achieved? What is it you've learned about yourself? What have we as a family, what have we learned about each other, or how have we grown? And so really getting kids to touch on that side, and that's really touching on an area of resilience and post-traumatic growth after really stressful times.
Terrific. Anyone else have anything else to comment on that question?
Look,
Jeff,
it is an interesting one, the fact that you said, do we think they're only doing Zoom lessons? I believe there's research around students overseas who had no remote learning, and it was a very short space of time that it took for them to catch up and surpass where they might have been. And the same in Scandinavian countries where the children start school so much later. However, has that focus on technology and Zoom and connection through video games and whatever else the children are playing online, is that perhaps not as helpful as we had all hoped it had been? That will be very interesting, the difference, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Mm.
All right. So, Chris, did you have something that you wanted to add?
No, I just acknowledge that we won't expect our children to snap back in anyway. We will have to be treating each of our young learners as they come back in individually, and they'll all be coming from different spaces. Some children will be glad to be out of the house and back into school, and others won't want to be back at school, as Emily pointed out. So, Fred, the challenge for us is really going to be treating each of them individually and trying to address the needs that they have and work with their families and the staff to be able to give the children the best return to school that we possibly can, and deal with the other things as we go through. So that'll be my take on it, just trying to do it individually.
And I think everybody that I've been speaking to in education, our local principals and teachers from my own school and others, David, it's getting the children to that starting line again, the social, emotional, until they're ready to begin. We don't know what we don't know.
But
so
I think
it's got to be individual. We've already employed 2 teachers who are currently on leave from our school to just help support. It's one area we have saved some money in is our relief teacher budget, but I would imagine that we're going to dig very deep into that very quickly to make sure our children have the social, emotional and emotional support that they need at the very outset.
Yeah. So I'll just say, move on to the next question, but for one of the things for us to flag in terms of our alternative roadmap is we're going to need sufficient investment in our schools to ensure that social and emotional component is properly recognised and acknowledged and worked through. We don't know what we're dealing with. We don't know the huge, and I think we probably underrate the ramifications of what COVID has done up until this point on our kids, on our mental health and well-being, on the social interaction, on a whole range of things. I just flagged that. We'll come back to it later. Let's go to, I think it's Leora. Leora, question for you.
There we go, I'm off mute. Hi, David. Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time this evening.
Pleasure.
It's a great discussion. I am a parent at Caulfield South. So Gail, your wonderful school. I've got a little boy in prep. And I think one of the big concerns I've had is we're not teachers. We've been running our own 2 jobs at home. We've got a little girl in kinder, and we've been trying to get through the work to the best of our abilities, but we're not teachers. We haven't trained for being teachers. And I think my concern is the fact that they've lost the love of learning in the way that they should have received it at school, in terms of especially the prep years. There's a fundamental grounding which they get being at school in those early years. And I just concerned that this might have an impact on their, next year, on their later years, because prep is such a foundational year at school. The importance, the value, the excitement, the 100 days of school, all that comes with it and you've done an amazing job. Your teachers have done an amazing job, but we're not at school. So what is the impact, and across the board, do you think it'll have on later years?
Great question. Gail, so milestone years, prep, grade 6.
Absolutely.
12, I know they're big years.
They are. And I think it's really important that schools, we know very well that the children have missed so much. I think the fact that we have the play-based learning approach at our school, that will help address to somewhat. We've had discussions as to, do some of our teachers from prep need to go up into grade? We've made no decisions, Leora, at this stage, but, should our children stay together in the same cohort, for example? I'm sure the same discussions are going on in many schools. How we it's everybody. We've talked about our transition for our kinder children coming into school, for our year 7s going on to year 6s going into year 7, and we always focus on the transition through the school each year. But this year, more than ever, we're going to need to be really aware of what those children, some children will not have missed a great deal, but some children will have missed much. And we won't know, and we might be very surprised at which children have missed and what they have missed. So as Chris said, we just have to take it children by children, grade by grade. Teachers need time with their children to find out where we're at. And as I said, we can only support with the staff that we can bring in with the budget that we've got. And we'll certainly be doing, we spent a few hours today actually with our leadership team talking through a lot of those areas as to how on earth we, I've been grateful that I haven't been the person making the decisions up higher, and I've been very, I empathise with them. We're sitting there, say, as Chris said, we've been checking our emails, waiting for that operations guide to come out at 6:45 last night. It's a really difficult time, and I understand that they're in a position like us. We're doing things, when they're far too close to us for our comfort at the moment. But when our children come back, we will just have to be supporting our teachers as best we possibly can, supporting the parents. I mean, our parents, we can't even have our parent helpers, coming to school. It's
it makes it really
tough. Very difficult time, and we will all have to be, and I know people's patience is wearing thin, but I've said to my teachers these holidays, and I had a bigger break in these holidays than I've had for a very long time in between school, because we need to be patient and have the wherewithal ourselves to manage the issues that may come, and to be able to bring the expertise in, and let's hope there is enough expertise out there to support us. And we have some terrific support within the school system. Our SSS, the school support officers, the social workers and school psychologists are an amazing support for our teachers and our schools, but they are very thinly spread at such a time as this.
So I know, did you want to add anything, any of our other panellists? We've got a heap of questions. So unless anyone else wants to add anything, I might go straight to Dr. Clive Kings. Welcome, Clive.
Thanks, David. I just want to make some points. I thought what you've all explained is a lot of strong feeling for the children and what their needs are, what their demands are. And I was just trying to think that while I've mainly been involved with secondary in the past, I think it's still relevant in primary that we need to look to the future. The future is a program where many people going into the workforce will in fact be using online communication. They won't be sending them on expensive overseas trips. They won't be sending them on first class travel, on high level costly hotels, and all the time they have away, etc., etc. They'll be more efficient and combine. It also strikes me that in every job now, more and more is required in terms of technology. And what I'd like to say is I think we need to bear that in mind, even in a primary level, that an introduction to combine the online learning with face-to-face learning.
Yeah, look,
it struck me the other day when I had an online contact with the doctor. I thought it would have been meaningless if I hadn't met the doctor. And I think the same thing happens here with children.
Chris, we're going to have to keep going. Sorry, I get the general context of where you're going, and if I could,
there are further points.
Sorry,
there are further points. One
okay,
is,
sorry, we've got to keep moving. If you could just summarise with one or two quick points, if you could. No, sorry, I've now lost him. Look, I think that's a really important conversation. We've obviously the opportunity of online is something that we're all using. We're all able to adapt. Very interesting. I'll make this comment in that when this all started, I know from political, a business perspective, from a whole range of things, people were saying, oh, we're all going to be working from home from here on in. It's going to be, we're not going to go to an office. We're not going to be able to have the meetings that we're having anymore. Things have flipped. And certainly from my perspective, I reckon nothing replaces face-to-face. And I think we'll probably have a combination, I know I will, of a number of Zoom meetings. But I reckon at the very least, there'll be 3 days in an office environment and maybe 1 or 2 days from home. That's my perspective. Does the panel have any other perspective? Emily, what about you from teaching?
Look, it remains to be seen. I mean, in terms of a tertiary teaching perspective, we're online. So we've been online all year and likely to remain online, I suspect. But how long that's going to last for, because I guess we're a bit different in the tertiary sector because we've got students coming from all over the place in terms of, you know, interstate, but international as well. So we're slightly different in terms of being able to get people into Victoria for classes.
Yeah. Now, next question I've got is from Alyssa. I know we had one of Gail's parents online. I think we've got one of Chris's parents in Alyssa Wolf. Go for Alyssa.
Thanks, David. Hi, Chris. I just want to say that I have 3 children in the public system. 2 of them are at Caulfield Junior College with Chris, and I have one at Glenara College. And I just want to, at the outset, just acknowledge the incredible work that our school leadership have done. The teachers have been exceptional. And I know I speak for most, you know, every parent I've spoken with, we are incredibly grateful for what they have done for our children. It's in very challenging circumstances. My concern has more to do with the issue of the service delivery of the public system. David earlier talked about investment, and Gail, you used the word resources. My question is, or I suppose my concern comes from what I see is a growing divide between the public and the private system going forward. Now, I have a lot of friends in the private system, and I'm well aware that they have jumped on technology well before even the government announced the closures of schools. They were doing full and are still doing full day online service delivery via Zoom of classes. It's been a very, very different experience in the public system. We get, very few classes. I think there's a lot of discretion. And again, I think there's been a real lack of investment from the department in educating our teachers, in technology, in support, whether it be providing support for parents on how to manage your children during these difficult times, mental health support, and so on and so forward. So, and in particularly, in our area, it may not be so bad, but certainly in more disadvantaged areas, it's we have no idea really of what is yet to come. So my question is, and sorry for a very long introduction, is what is going to be done going forward to deal with this growing divide, not just between private and public, but between now public and public? The children who've had parents who are available, who could support them, who could give up their work time to actually help them, and those children who may not have even had access to technology, didn't have access to space to learn, certainly may not have had parents available to help them. So that growing divide.
Yeah.
What about all the children who've been disengaged from school? How are they going to be re-engaged? And then all the other mental health issues.
All right, Turu, there's a number of questions there. I might go to Chris. You can kick it off.
No, thanks, Alyssa. Acknowledge the work that's been done by our families and our community, particularly at Caulfield Junior College, where initially our technology capabilities were not where they really should have been prior to the pandemic coming on. We've tried really hard to address that. I think we've got a majority of it pretty right. It's taken a fairly steep learning curve to get it to that, and that's that part of teacher education that we really do need to focus on. The differences that children would have experienced in online learning from the homes that they're living in currently and the circumstances they're in, some of those factors we can't really impact on. But some of the supports we need to put in place and the resourcing around that is not only how schools operate, but it's also what we're provided with externally to support those children that are going through some pretty tough times, trying to engage in learning or just getting through their day-to-day existence at the moment. So they're the challenges that I would sort of see, Alyssa, that we really have to focus on, and that's that teacher training, the support of the parent, and also the provision for the students that are in distress or having great difficulty. I'd say they're the key resource pieces for us.
Emily,
as a system,
sorry, keep going. Sorry,
our system probably, and Gail, I think you'd agree, doesn't provide in that external space for the clinical support and supervision of families and students who are in distress and trouble. We often find that our most difficult. It's not the teaching or the curriculum content, it's picking up on those children that are having issues or troubles. So they're the ones that we need to help.
So thanks, Chris. Emily, Alyssa makes a number of really valid points. Obviously, we've had parents themselves that are in a wide-ranging different elements, from parents that have been able to help, parents that have been working and have not been able to help. A lot of the times, kids just locked in a room and hopefully being able to learn from a computer effectively. And then obviously the big divide between the public and private system. Where do you see all of this lining up? And do we need a stronger investment in the public system going forward to cope with some of these issues that we've been talking about?
Yeah, look, you'll always have me every day of the week advocating for more resources and more of an individualised response in schools, and the capacity for educators and for school staff to be able to give that individualised care and attention to the family issue, but also the issues that then carry on for the kids, and ongoing issues as well. I will say as well, it's about resourcing, but it's also important to acknowledge that the families most at risk are the hardest to engage. And so we see this through our work, through research. We always want to tap into families who are most at risk and find out what we can do to support them. And so schools face the same issue, that you know, those that are most at risk are less engaged and less likely to engage and come to school meetings, for example, and to come and try to find solutions to issues. So again, it's about resourcing, it's about time and space. And the only thing that helps in terms of time and space for educators to deal with these issues is resourcing in schools.
Terrific. I might go, thank you, Alyssa. I might go to Maxine. I know she's got a question for us. Hi, Maxine. Nice to see you.
Hi, everyone. No, look, tonight's discussion's been great. And I'm a mum of 2 children in Year 7 and Year 8. And right now, I think even though they're both at private schools, I think the impact has been quite harsh on the kids. In fact, I don't know if I'd want to be a kid right now. And I think earlier this year I was saying I don't know if I want to be an adult right now. One thing that really got me, Gail, was something you said about finding the budget. Oh, well, that horrifies me, because I know that schools are going to be incredibly stressed with finding the capacity to have the social workers' capacity to deal with the population. And Dave, this is where I reach out to you, and I reckon you need to get Cindy McLeish on this one to fight hard for funding, because the kids are going to need it. And I tell you, it's not just going to end this year. I think I've watched my vibrant 12-year-old daughter who just started Year 7 this year, and it was a very difficult transition for her anyway. Her vibrancy, she's not eating properly, she's not sleeping properly. She started calling herself a dumbass, and she was my clever one out of the 3 children. She's lost her self-esteem. She's absolutely struggling. And you know what? And I know I'm not alone when I talk about my daughter. My son, who's usually resilient, who's usually what I call the weaker one out of the 3 kids in resilience, has really stepped up. And every bit of help that he's been offered from school, he's like, I'll take it. If you want to give me someone for time management, I'll take it. If you want to give me classroom support, I'll take it. You know, anything to get through this. But they're both definitely got Zoom fatigue. I mean, I've got Zoom fatigue and I'm on Zoom less than they are. But I'm horrified to think that there's not going to be enough resources for kids to come back to school with, because I think there's going to be mental health issues that are going to carry on if they're not nipped in the bud soon.
What I mentioned, Maxine, was the fact that we've saved a lot of money in our budget because we've had teachers off site. We haven't had to employ relief teachers for absences, that sort of thing. And I said that will be eaten up very quickly for the additional resources that we may need. And it's interesting you said about the struggling child. As children go through education, we often find the children who have struggled, who have had to learn to gain the strategies, develop the strategies to get themselves through. And it often happens later in education. It's like, oh, I can problem solve this. I've had to problem solve all my life. I've learned those strategies, and those who breeze through often have not. And it's like, well, welcome to my world. I can teach you about how you survive when you're a struggler. So there will perhaps be some earlier learning for some of our higher achieving children too. But it really, I believe it is people that we need. Our people resources have never been more important.
And social workers and psychologists, especially having come out of the primary school years of the public system, I know we're incredibly under-resourced prior to COVID, and finding the social workers and the psychologists to come into the school was already difficult. And, it concerns me, do we have enough of the population that's going to be able to come into schools, especially the public system, and and help the kids. You know, is there going to be this waiting list to where they go, oh, we'll get to you in 3 months' time, you know, we've got 90 kids ahead of you, sorry. You know, that's because I've seen that happen in non-COVID times, where schools feel very overwhelmed by mental health issues that they were having pre-COVID, let alone now, you know.
Yeah, look, I think, Maxine, you make a very valid point. And Emily, I know that that's something that we're going to need to better resource, aren't we, for our schools going forward?
Yeah, oh, yeah, without a doubt. And just touching on what you've been speaking about as well, Maxine, I'm aware of time, but I think what you've touched on is we learn a lot about ourselves when we're younger, and particularly around, you know, that sort of young adolescent age, where we learn a lot about ourselves from other people. And so kids are questioning, who am I? What are my strengths? What are the things I find harder and more challenging? And so kids are potentially losing opportunities to learn about themselves through social interaction, through engaging with peers. And so that's potentially what some young people might be struggling with.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Maxine, for your honesty, and all the best to you, and all the best to all of the parents and the kids out there. You know, we know how hard it is, and we know that there is going to be so much more of an emphasis that's going to be needed to ensure that our kids are safe going forward. Our last question for tonight is from Devora. Welcome, Devora.
Hi, everyone. Hi, David, and thanks everyone for tonight. I guess I'm a teacher. I actually just graduated this year, so it's been quite a whirlwind of a year, but it's great to be teaching. And I've been with my kids. I went on placement the first term, so I was with my kids for 3 weeks face-to-face this year, and the rest has been all online, so I'm looking forward to going back next week. For me, my biggest concern is, what do you think school will look like in terms of being COVID safe, different to, let's say, when we were back in May? I have seen in schools overseas where they have tried making the teachers and kids wear masks, the social distancing between the kids. And for me, it's like really important that the kids have as most normal environment as possible. And of course, you know, we're going to make sure you take the temperatures in the morning and the hand sanitizer, but I guess that's, for me, is like the biggest concern. I don't want it to become where we're this cold, isolated school and everything's all rigid and we have to be the whole time it's about Corona. And I'm just worried that the government's going to come out and try and make these rules that are not in the best interests of the kids, I guess, emotional and mental health, and just trying to focus on the physical health of things.
Devora, that is the best question to finish, that you've been so thoughtful in considering that question, because I think certainly our conversation tonight has all been the health and well-being of the child. Before I get our panellists to answer that question, what school are you at? Where are you teaching at the moment?
I'm at Yasuri Hatara. It's an
Lovely.
all-boys school.
Okay,
yeah.
Very nice. Thank you. To our panellists, I'll bring you all up. Okay, who'd like to have a go at that? Chris, you've got to off mute.
Yeah. That's a good thing to be able to do. Devora, can I just acknowledge and say thank you for joining a wonderful service. Being a teacher is a lifelong commitment. I don't think you'll love every minute of it. You'll have some highs and lows, and we're going through a bit of a low at the moment, but on Monday it becomes a high because we get all our kids back. The structures we'll have to go through will be really around social distancing. It'll be around making sure that our parents, our first time when we came back, our parents were remarkable. They followed the instructions, they got their kids back in, they really made it really, really positive for our children. Routine is what our children need. They need to get back into a structured environment where they're given opportunities to be connected with their classmates, with their cohort, with their teacher, with the support staff. And they're the things when you go back to work on Monday that you really need to focus on. For our parents who are in the audience, we really want the children to be given a positive message about coming back to school. We want them to be able to walk through the door on Monday with their heads up, a smile on their face, knowing that their teachers are ready for them to come back. There'll be masks when there are more than one adult in the room. There'll be hand sanitizer, which is in every organisation we go into now. There'll be structured gateways that they go through. staggered recess breaks, eating inside, all those things that are just small pieces to give them the protection. But as teachers and Gail, as principals, we have a duty of care to our teachers as well. We have around 70 staff on our site, so we need to make sure they're in the best position to do their best work. So give them the opportunity to structure their learning spaces and get into this whole new challenge of 10 weeks before the holiday break again. Let's get as much of this 10 weeks as a positive for our students as possible. So good luck on Monday. I wish you well, and I'm sure that you'll be a wonderful teacher and you'll do the very best you can for those children in your care. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Gail, do you want to add?
Look, I probably do just want to make one comment around something that's been in my mind all the way through. Our children learn to manage life by living life, by managing strategy, learning strategies, managing strategies to be able to get around the bumps and the lumps that are in front of them. And I don't believe that we can protect them from this. We've had lawnmower and helicopter parents and whatever that we've been for years saying, let your children learn from the opportunities that are in front of them. Do not sabotage their learning by removing those difficulties. You can't do that in life. And I would suggest that COVID is here or something similar to today. And we as a society need to learn to live with it, manage it without sanitizing it so far that that life is not worth living. Our children, if I say, okay, I'm only going to have one class at a time out in the playground, I can assure you those children will be in clusters and there will be a heap of play space not being used. They are not going to, and it is not reasonable that children will be social distancing apart from one another. What is important is that they learn really solid, healthy practices that become day-to-day habits. And hand washing, not just sanitizing, is going to have to be part of that. So I just think it's around teaching everyone to manage the circumstances in the very best way that we can.
I think that is really a really good answer from both yourself and from Chris. And I think certainly, thanks Devorah, I think obviously one of the big changes that we've picked up in is hygiene. We're all going to wash, we're all going to sanitize, we're all going to watch our physical space in terms of what we do. But the point that you make, Gail, and the point that is so important is kids need to live their life. We need to be able to get kids back to what can be in a most normal setting possible. And this COVID is not going away. And I think it's a very, very important point to say, we can't have our kids locked up. We can't have families locked up. We can't have all of us locked up. We've got to be able to get things back as soon as possible. I want to finish with one final reflection from each of you, and then we'll wrap up. We know that with education, we always talk about education being the future. We want to make our schools the best possible. One of the things about all of our schools, particularly locally, is they're old schools. Our space is becoming more and more condensed because we've got more kids going to them. We know kids need playgrounds, kids need activities. What's the big wish list for each of your schools, right? Give me in 2 sentences, no more, the big wish list that we can advocate for to hopefully in 2022 to ensure that we can ensure Caulfield has the best facilities possible. And then I'm going to finish, Emily, with your final reflection. So let's start with Cara, with you.
Okay, so my final reflection, I'll just take a couple of minutes, David, is that while my son has been learning in the living room and I've been in there working and I've been listening to a lot of things, one of the things that I have been listening to is a reading of a book by Morris Gleitzman, so The Boy Overboard. And I was quite surprised. If you don't know this book, it's about a family fleeing from Afghanistan. I was like, wow, that is a hardcore thing to read at the moment. You know, why are they doing this book? And as it was being read out, and I've heard most of it, it's about resilience, and it's about from a child's perspective. And I'd really recommend anyone get hold of Annie Morris's books, because they're about a child's perspective of when things are going wrong. And to Gail and Chris's point is that, you know, this has happened and we just have to now get on with it as best as we can. And these kids, you know, some of them will be fine and some of them won't, and we have to be well resourced. Am I doing my list now, things that we want for 2022? Yeah. Okay. IT, I think to Alyssa's point earlier, it was a lot easier for the private schools to pivot to the, which is the word of the COVID, to online learning, because they had a lot more infrastructure and a lot more support, and they had a lot more funding in that. You know, the public schools just haven't had the budget to do it. And so I think that's a really important thing. And mental health support, you know, that we can't have enough. The other thing that my family's been doing is the Resilience Project, which is Hugh Van Silenball. We've been doing this, and they roll out a project for schools. And I don't know if, and I'm sure Emily would be aware of that, but, you know, to really fund those. I would rather see the recovery being in schools IT-led and mental health-led rather than a building recovery.
Okay, brilliant. That's a great pickup. I'm going to use resilience for your word.
Yes.
Over to you, Gail.
David, our school is a beautiful old school, as you well know. However, we have a beautiful new senior learning centre that was part of the Building the Education Revolution. Wonderful, flexible learning spaces. I would love to have the money to turn our old building, and I've got great ideas. We've thrown this around a lot as to how we can, but it's very expensive. The engineering in an old building is huge, and we could absolutely do with money spent updating our older building with respect to the beautiful building that it is, but making it a much more flexible learning space. I can't not say that we need that. We certainly need money around the people side. At the moment, clearly our focus is going to be on student wellbeing, and it needs people and the relational side of support to do that. But the long term is we need physical improvement in our school building as well. And shade.
Good shout. Shout out. Chris?
David, not a lot's changed in 100 years. In 1919, our school was a hospital for the Spanish flu. And in 2020, it's become a place where the COVID pandemic hasn't quite made it through the door, and we're determined that it won't. What we do want in 2022 is the capacity for our school community's master plan to come to life and to be given the respect that it should be treated with, in terms of allowing our facilities to be upgraded to a point where we're able to provide learning environments where technology and those sorts of things can actually become really built into what we're doing. So our school council's working really hard at the moment on a master plan that's ready to go. It's all been costed, it's right to go. We would want to be able to go to our community with a really strong approach to our local politicians and get them on board to give us a locally based project that brings our facilities into line with what we would be expecting in our public system. So
I'll look forward to that meeting. I'll look forward to that meeting. Thank you very much, Chris. And, and yours too, Gail. And you too, Cara.
Yeah, we've got ours. We're working on ours as well.
Good. Yeah. And final reflection from you, Emily.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep this really short. I'm not going to talk about funding. Funding is definitely needed, particularly for research, so we can learn about what's going on and actually have less guesswork. I've noticed there's been a bit of guesswork in our conversation, so we could actually learn a lot from this. Obviously, funding for schools and mental health support. We need to focus on high risk, at risk families and at risk kids. Focusing on resilience and what people have actually learned about themselves and reflecting on what we've learned and what kids have learned particularly about themselves and what they can take away. Showing confidence, so parents particularly showing confidence in kids going back to school, and that school is the right place for them to be. And so even though we don't feel so confident as adults, and we've had conversations about maybe not feeling so confident as adults, we model confidence for kids that school is the right place for them to be. And listening to kids. So listening to kids, making sure we're checking in and listening to them, and really asking the question and finding out, well, what do you think about what's happening? What do you think about having your temperature checked? What do you think about the hand sanitizer? And rolling with it depending on what they respond with.
Brilliant. Thank you very much to you, Emily, for that. Thank you to you, Chris. Thank you, Gail, and thank you, Cara. Tonight has been a fantastic conversation. I think some of the key takeouts for our alternative roadmap that we will be actually delivering and be putting out to all of you and publishing to you, that is very much grassroots. And our grassroots conversation today is all about confidence for our children. It's about resilience, and it's about allowing children to be children going forward. And we want to ensure that we have the environment for our kids to be able to do that. And it all starts with our schools. And our schools need to be the focus. They need to be our priority. And we are so lucky in Caulfield to have the best schools that I think anywhere. And we need to ensure that those schools continue to be able to do the work that they can do. So thank you to all of our panelists tonight. If I could also finish to everybody out there, firstly, if anybody is having any issues at all, please feel free to contact me in my office. We're there to help. If we can't help you directly, we'll find somebody that can help you. And also, finally, this is part of a series which continues to talk about the issues that are important in a roadmap to recovery. Next week, we will be talking about the future of health and the wellbeing industry, which is quite topical considering we spoke about a lot of that tonight. Next week, we'll be focusing a lot on the families, a lot on the individual. What is the alternative roadmap? Talking to Paul Zaidman, who's a Dance House International owner, Kirsty Robbie from just up the road, Managing Director of Studio 46, Sharon Towle, who talks about kinesiology and other alternative medicine, and some other surprise guests as well. So please join us next Monday with that conversation. As all, stay well, stay healthy, and thank you once again to all of our panelists. Have a great night. Thank you very much.